Well, once again, Ireland has been front and centre of the Brexit debate. So let's try and get some answers with Ireland's Europe Minister, Helen McEntee. Thank you very much for joining us on the programme this morning. Now, we know that you don't want to, we know that you don't intend to, but can you guarantee that if there is a no deal, there will be no hard border in Ireland?
Well, what we have done throughout this entire process is try to work with the EU, obviously led by Michel Barnier, but with the UK also, to ensure that we never get to the space where there is a no-deal scenario and where we can even contemplate any kind of a return to a border on this island. And so that is exactly what we have been doing. Negotiations have been ongoing for months and months at this stage, and we believe that we have found the best way to ensure that no matter what happens, no matter what kind of a future relationship that we have, that we never return to borders of the past. The withdrawal agreement and the backstop within the withdrawal agreement is the way to do that. But obviously, without that, our own opinion and from the Irish government point of view is that there are still obligations there. Brexit or no Brexit, the Good Friday Agreement is an international peace treaty. It was signed by the Irish government, by the political parties in the north, but also the UK government, and integral to that peace treaty and ensuring that we maintain the peace, not just on this island, but we know the impact that it had even further afield, is by ensuring that we don't have a border. And I believe that those obligations are there and must be fulfilled irrespective of the outcome of Brexit.
I understand that you're working hard to try and make sure there is a deal, that you are very keen to fulfil the obligations. But I was kind of missed whether or not there was a guarantee that if there is a no deal, there won't be a hard border.
So if there is a no-deal scenario, and I hope that that's not the case. I don't believe that that will be the case. We're obviously less than 65 days out until the 29th of March, and there will be a number of votes taking place in Westminster next week. However, if we get to a no-deal scenario, the UK will have its obligations to the WTO, Ireland, and the EU will have its obligations to protect the single market and the customs union. But separately to that, the Irish government and the UK government both have obligations to ensure that we protect the peace process, and an integral part of that is protecting the invisible border that essentially exists at the moment. So as far as we are concerned, we're not planning for a border. We have never been planning for a border because it's simply not something that we can countenance. There are obligations there. And again, we're not asking for something different. We're not asking for something new. This has been the case from the very beginning of the negotiations, which started probably about 2 years ago at this stage. There was a commitment given by the Prime Minister many times, last December, again in March, when she presented her Chequers paper, and as recently as last week. And so all we are asking is that those commitments are fulfilled. And I think it's important to stress that even those who want to leave the European Union, those who say that we should leave without a deal, or that the UK should leave without a deal, have continuously said that they do not want to see a border returned on this island. And so I think if we're all in agreement, there is an onus on every single one of us, but in particular the UK, because they are the ones who are leaving, to ensure that we do not have a border on this island.
The thing that I'm slightly confused about is that if in a no-deal scenario you can't countenance having a hard border, there must be a way of avoiding it, and in which case, why do we need the backstop?
Well, the backstop is there as an insurance mechanism and a policy. The backstop is there because of the red lines that the UK put down very early on in these negotiations. The UK have said that you're leaving the single market, you're leaving the customs union, and so for us, the withdrawal agreement and the backstop within it is the best way to address those concerns. However, if we find ourselves, and again, this is an if, and we're speaking hypothetically, if we find ourselves in a no-deal scenario, it does not remove the obligations and the commitment we believe that the Prime Minister made in the joint report and the statement in December of 2017. A very clear commitment was given at that time to ensure that we avoid a border, and so we would expect the UK and the EU have been very clear on this as well. They will do everything in their power to avoid a hard border. We will expect the UK to live up to their obligations, not just from December 17, but as part of the Good Friday Agreement. This is not just about trade. This is not just about customs. This is not just about the economy. This is about protecting peace on this island. This is about making sure the scenes that we saw last weekend, where a car bomb went off in Derry, where you had subsequent hoaxes and possible threats, that does not start happening again, because again, this is not just an impact that it would have on the island of Ireland, but we know, looking back at the Troubles, looking back at 20, 30 years ago, that it stretched much further than that. So there is an onus and an obligation. Of course, it's very difficult. That's why it took 18 months to negotiate the overall Irish backstop and what we have today. But of course, if red lines were to change, if there were to be a different approach in terms of the future relationship, then obviously it would make things much easier in ensuring that we never actually have to use the Irish backstop. So all that we are asking now is that the UK fulfil the commitments that they made, not just in terms of the Brexit as a whole and their commitment to the Irish backstop, but also to the Good Friday Agreement.
Okay. I think you speak very powerfully there about the importance of making sure that you don't go back to some of the problems of the past in Ireland with that border. So I just wonder if I could try and work out if there's any compromise that you are prepared to make, because of course Theresa May lost that vote by 230 votes, the worst defeat of any sitting government, which is quite extraordinary if you think about it. Some MPs next week are going to be calling for a time limit to the backstop, or perhaps a unilateral exit mechanism to the backstop. Is that something that you could countenance if it meant that this deal could get over the line?
Well, to suggest that we would compromise on the Irish backstop is suggesting that we would compromise on the need and the requirement to ensure that we protect the peace that we've had for the past 20 years. To put a unilateral clause on a backstop, to put a time limit on the backstop, it ceases to become a backstop, or it ceases to be a backstop. It's not an insurance policy, it's not an insurance mechanism, and that is why we need it. We need it to make sure that we protect the peace. And, you know, while the vote might have lost by a significant amount, I absolutely don't believe that it was purely because of the Irish backstop. I've said many times before that I believe there were a lot of MPs who did not agree with the withdrawal agreement because of the fact that it kept them too closely tied to the European. Others felt that it wasn't close enough to the European Union. Others wanted to leave without a deal. There are those who I know don't want to leave at all, and those who aren't sure what they want. Yes. What we do know, however, is that the people in Northern Ireland, that the political parties, every single political party, bar the DUP, want the withdrawal agreement and want the backstop within it. Citizens, industry sectors, whether it's the farming community, whether it's manufacturing, food and drink, they all support the backstop. And we are very clear that if it becomes time limited and if there is a unilateral clause where the UK can pull out on its own, it ceases to be what it is supposed to be, and that is the insurance mechanism to protect what we have fought so hard for on this island for so long. 20 years is not a long time, and again, to go back to the weekend, it doesn't take very long to regress and to go back to problems that we had in the past, and that is what we are trying to avoid at all costs, and I believe that's what people in the UK want to avoid as well.
I can't help thinking that there's a bit of a contrast between the amount of time that we spend talking about Brexit in Ireland now and the amount of time we spent talking about it before the referendum and during the campaign. And I just wonder if you think that some politicians in the UK don't really understand the complexities of the situation in Ireland.
Well, I would say that I think before the referendum took place, there probably wasn't very much thought of Northern Ireland or Ireland or the impact that it might have. I'm sure that there absolutely were MPs who understood and knew that there would be significant consequences. But from an Irish point of view, we absolutely understood those, and this is why we don't support Brexit. We don't think it is a good policy, not just economically, but the impact that this can have on the peace process. Before Brexit even took place, our own government put together a document, a working paper to identify the possible challenges that we felt would arise if Brexit were to actually happen and were to be followed through. And that's obviously since developed, it's evolved, and there's a huge amount of work done since then. But we were very clear from the outset that this would have, particularly if the UK were to leave the single market and the customs union, extremely negative impact on the Good Friday Agreement and all that is connected with that, the all-island economy, the areas of cooperation, north and south, ranging from health to social protection to education. There's about 142 and possibly even more, but also the other integral parts of the Good Friday Agreement, including citizens' rights. So there is a huge amount there's a huge amount at stake here, and this is why we have said that we're not willing to compromise. But at the same time, I think we have compromised throughout this process. The Irish backstop initially was specific to Northern Ireland. At the request of the UK, it was then extended to a UK-wide customs union. So there has been compromise on both sides. But in terms of cutting it off and having a time limit on it, it simply ceases to be what it's supposed to be, and that is an insurance policy and mechanism.
OK, we're out of time. Thank you very much.